Frankly, since I left the academic scene, I've given up the habit of relying on quotations and responding to them. And I think citizens in general should take on that habit of not responding to quotations or affirmations by others, but thinking on their own feet. I like to think that I learned to do that, if nothing else, in my long life. So, if you'll forgive me, I'll start simply from the beginning, which is the title of this session. We have three concepts you have identified, and they are presented to us. I perceive them as something of a three-headed dragon that is threatening Europe and its survival and its future. What is the common thread among them? It seems this aura of negativity about them. This aura of despair almost that you did try to depict in your quotation, and that doubt about the future. That being the common element, my question is, what is it about these three concepts that unites them, and where do they come from, and why are they looming over our collective heads as some kind of alternative to what we had before? Well, I think the alternative that we had before was indeed a consensus. There was a general consensus on which what is now the European Union was first of all founded very modestly many years ago. It continued to evolve in what seemed to be an extremely positive direction in terms of reconciliation, putting resources in common rather than fighting over them, win-win situations rather than zero-sum games, peace and collaboration among nations rather than endless wars such as Europe had seen before that. And indeed in 1991 or in 1989 after the fall of the Berlin Wall and then the collapse of the Soviet Union, we had a vision of a world that would not be divided into ideologies that had to confront each other and had to see each other in as mirror images and negative mirror images and enemies of each other. All that having disappeared, then, what is it that remains behind? Well, human nature remains behind, human society remains behind. We are, ever since the French Revolution, or indeed since the ancient Greeks, there has been this movement of trying to define what a human being is and what rights they have, or indeed who and what is a human being. Our lovely ancient Greeks, with their first seeds of democracy, did not consider slaves as human beings, nor did they admit to their political process people who were not born in Athens and who were not bona fide Athenians. That remains something that lasts for several thousands of years until our present current day. Who is a human being? Who is a citizen? Who has a right to decide? And I think that the second part is that we are also pack animals. We are collective beings. We do create societies and we live in societies. And the thing is that the paradox of it is that if Jean-Jacques Rousseau thought that society is something that is imposed on our nature from outside, it is somehow something nasty and unpleasant, shackles that the free spirit has to endure and against which they have to fight and go back to nature to see the full flowering of their inner being and their inner soul, well, then society in many ways is what forms us as social beings, and we would be desperate, and except for some hermits who are the exception that confirms the rule, we like to be in societies, we like to feel that others share our values and our conceptions of the world. And it is this security then that people look for. They look at physical security, that they will not be throttled, they will not have their throats cut, that bombs will not fall on their threads, that tanks will not invade their territory, that they can rely on leading their lives without threat from inside. They look forward to stability, so that they will not be attacked by their fellow citizens, be it in the dark street at midnight or generally in the light of day, in confrontations, be they political or economic. And they look to something that I think is forgotten in all this debate in which Europe was formed. It's the individual, the identity of both nations and individuals. I think that the oratory, the rhetoric, the formulation of the goals of the Europe we are building somehow took many things for granted. And what current populations are discovering, that there's a vacuum. There's a vacuum in a place where people build up their identity as individuals and social beings. And they hear this siren call from various quarters who come to fill that vacuum. And that vacuum is quickly filled by various movements that you have called by these derogatory names, and that we indeed, many of us, and I join that, I'm in that number, consider as essentially having elements of danger to them. But what I think we should focus on and never forget is that people do not act at random. They act with motivation. They have reasons for acting so. If they are attracted to something, it means that it rewards them. It offers them something that they find valuable. Worse, it offers them something that is missing in their lives and that alternatives had not somehow managed to fulfill. And when we're talking about the failure of democracy or of the European project, etc., we should really be looking at what do we mean by it. What is it about democracy that has failed, or what remains still and will hopefully remain forever? We have to be careful not to throw out the baby with the bathwater, which I think too often is done. I think I'll stop here for the moment.